Welcome to another edition of Ron's Reloading Channel. In this episode, we're going to talk about some basic reloading equipment to get started with. On a lot of the forums that I belong to, the question that always comes up probably 2 to 3 times a day is that I'm a new reloader or I want to get into reloading, and what kind of equipment do I need to get into reloading? So with this video that I'm putting together, I'll go through some of the basic equipment to get you started. So stay tuned. This is probably the most important tool to have in your reloading arsenal is the manual. I recommend picking up several different manuals because, like with the Hornady 10th edition here, it is proprietary to Hornady projectiles. As with the Lyman, it's a little bit more of a general category, but either one will do you. But like I said, this is probably the most important tool on your reloading bench. Another good source of information that you can get is off the powder manufacturer's website. I do use a lot of Hodgdon powder, so if I find something that's not in my reloading manuals, is that I will access Hodgdon's website. So now we're going to start talking about some basic reloading equipment. I do have a single stage press here, and I do have a 12 gauge shotgun press here, and then I have an auto progressive press here. So for starting out on reloading, I would recommend you starting off on a single stage press until you get your process down. And then if you would like to move over to an auto progressive press, you will have your process down. So with the auto progressive press, there are a lot of moving parts to go wrong. And if you're not familiar on setting up dies and basically just knowing what to look for, this could be a real headache for you. So that's why if you're just starting out and reloading, pick up a single stage press. In the long run, I find myself going back to my single stage press to load ammunition versus my auto progressive. I've been getting more into rifle rounds, so I definitely like my single stage press over my auto progressive press just for that reason. So in this video clip here, you see that I do have a Hornady single stage press. It really doesn't matter if you want to go with RCBS, Lee, Lyman. The reason why I went with Hornady is because in my area where I live, I have about 12 different stores to where I can pick up Hornady accessories. So it's pretty easy for me to find accessories. So that's really the reason why that I went with the Hornady. So we'll start off with the dies. So as you can see here, that this is my die set for 30-06, and I write the number shell plate that I need to load this 30-06 or any other caliber. So with the die set, this die here is your sizing die and your decapping die. As you can see, that there's the decapping pin, and how you adjust that is you would screw in or unscrew this spindle where my finger's moving on, and then just lock it down with that nut. This die here is your seating and crimping die. So what I have found with this is that I like to seat my projectiles first, and then in this particular case with 30-06 is I will put a very, very slight crimp on the projectile. And of course I have my shell plate, #1 shell plate. But now something that I recently picked up is this Hornady Click Adjust Bullet Seating Micrometer. And this is definitely a game changer when it comes to seating your projectile. So each click adjusts the projectile 1/1000th of an inch. So you can really get this dialed in for your projectile seating depth. You don't necessarily need this starting off, but it is definitely a game changer. So while we're on the subject of dies, I pulled out the set of dies on the left are for 44 Magnum, and then the set of dies on the right are for 460 Smith & Wesson. And what I wanted to show you is that some of the big bore calibers in pistol will come with a 4-die set. As you can see, the left, which is my 44 Magnum, is just 3-die set. So you have your decapping and sizing die, and then in the middle of the set that's on the left is your case mouth expansion die. Then the die on the far left is your seating and roll crimping die. So now the dies on the right hand side for the 460 Smith & Wesson, you see 4 dies, and the same holds true on how I have that in the box, is that the far right die is your sizing decapping, your middle die is your case mouth expansion, and then the one on the left is your seating and roll crimping die. But the die at the very top is a taper crimp die. So that's really the only difference between the two die sets. I know, like with the Smith & Wesson 500 Magnums, it comes in a 4-die set as well. So now we're going to talk a little bit about seating your primers. So one of the things that I do use on decapping my brass is that this is a universal decapping die. So you don't necessarily have to have this right away, but it definitely helps to where I'm not dirtying up my dies that I load. I like to have clean brass when I run them through my dies, but we'll get into that equipment a little bit later on in the video. So this here is a primer arm for the single stage press. I just went out and got 2, and I label mine S and L. Represents for small primers, and the L for large primers. And they just simply go into the ram of the single stage press. There are other ways that you can seat your primers. If you have a hand priming tool, that's fine. I'll show you one here in a minute. So this here's the Hornady hand priming tool. So like with the Hornady Classic Lock and Load kit, is that this is what you would get. The black represents if you're using Hornady shell plates, and the green represents if you're using a RCBS shell plate holder. The chamfer and deburring tool, there's quite a few options that you can go with, but this is definitely a necessity to have in your tools. This one's manual, and I do have one that is electric. I prefer to use the electric one over the hand, but I have this just in case I get in a pinch. So, but like I said, it's not necessarily to start out with one of these. These will do you just fine. So in this segment, we're going to talk about powder measuring tools. The electronic scale on the left is a Frankfurt IntelliDropper scale. It throws my powder and it will weigh the powder charge. The little Hornady scale that comes with the lock and load kit, it's okay to start out with, but I would probably recommend on definitely getting a beam scale, which as you can see, that's an RCBS beam scale. So one of the things that I like to do is I will throw my powder charge with my Frankfurt Arsenal, and it will weigh it, and then I will cross-check the powder throw with the beam scale. The powder charge. In the last segment of the video, you saw that I had a Frankfurt IntelliDropper. It dispenses powder. With the Hornady Lock and Load Classic kit or the AP presses, that you will get a powder throw, and this is the one that would come in a kit. It's all strictly manual. Another tool that you would want to have, especially if you're getting into rifle reloading, is that this is my case trimmer. So this is really handy on trimming down your cases so they're all uniform. This device is very easy to set up depending on the caliber that you reload. You want to make sure that you have a good caliper on your reloading bench. As you can see here, I have what they call an anvil on my caliper, so that's where I just rest the case on when I start measuring. As you get into rifle reloading, you definitely want to pick up a bullet comparator kit. So what I do, instead of measuring my cartridge overall length, I measure what they call CBTO, or case base to ogive. So this will definitely help you out on finding what your CBTO measurement is. So I would recommend picking up a set if you're going to do rifle reloading. Another good tool to have on your reloading bench and doing rifle loads are this headspace comparator kit. The powder funnels. It is just what it says. Just a funnel to pour the powder into your case. So in this segment, I'm showing you a bullet puller. So this one is, I have this set up for 30 caliber since I do a lot of 30-06 and 300 Winchester Magnum loads. So I have a collet in here that is specified for 30 caliber. You don't necessarily need one of these to start off either, but it is highly recommended for you to pick up a kinetic hammer. This will do the same function as the bullet puller that I just showed you. Powder trickler. Just basically put some powder in here and you can manually turn this, and this is how you would fine tune your load. So if my powder thrower threw like 32 grain of powder, but my recipe calls for 32.2 grain, you can just turn this until you get that 0.2 grain. This one here's manual. I wanted to test the vibratory trickler out, and this here does take a little bit of getting used to, but it works pretty well. Maybe, I don't know if I would say it was a waste of money to pick this up, but I like to try different things. But this one here is more of a necessity, where the vibratory trickler, that was more of a luxury item. Loading trays, my opinion is I can never have enough of them. It's good just to have a couple, you know, to start out with, and you'll be fine. This is a pistol round check gauge, and it does exactly that. It checks the cartridge to make sure that theoretically that the case should chamber, but I take it a step farther. So like if I'm loading 45 ACP, I will physically take out the barrel of my 1911 and I will drop the round into the barrel just to make sure that it's properly seating and properly chambering when I get my 1911 put back together. That way I know that I won't have any stuck cases on the ejection. So if you're loading rifle rounds and you want to find your CBTO, I do have a separate video out on how to find and measure for CBTO or case-based ogive. So this is part of the overall length gauge, and what you would do is that you would just screw on a modified case. This one here just so happens to be for 4570, and it just simply screws on just like that, and then you would put the projectile up in here, and then you would push this gray rod till you felt the lands of the rifle. So one thing that I will do when I'm done doing a very light crimp on my rifle loads is that I will check them to make sure that my rounds are seated flush with this check gauge. But then once again, I take it a step farther and I will chamber each round just to make sure that they cycle smoothly and that there's no hang-ups with them. When reloading rifle rounds, a lube pad or sizing wax is definitely a necessity. So here's a lube pad, and then I have sizing wax. Now for straight wall cartridges, you don't necessarily have to lube. The dies that I use, they are a carbide die, so I don't have to lube straight wall cartridges, but I definitely lube like my 4570 loads and my bottleneck loads. So another tool to have, but it's not necessarily that you need it to start out, is that I use a dehydrator to dry my cases after I wet tumble them. And there's a few different ways that you can tumble your brass to clean it. You can use dry media such as corn cob or walnut. I started out wet tumbling from the get-go. I like the wet tumbling. To me, I think it's cleaner. I don't have dust coming up here in my reloading bench or anything like that. But now the device to the left is what that does is it separates the brass from my stainless steel pins that I use to clean my brass. Something that I like to use these plastic jars. As you can see, I have them labeled, one for clean brass and the one for dirty, so I know what's what. Another good thing to have on your reloading bench are these little index cards. As you can see here, I like to write my loads down, and then I will just simply tape this onto the box of ammunition that I loaded up. With this video that I put together, I certainly hope it helps you all out on the equipment that you need to pick up to get into reloading. Until then, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.